During the 2018 Egyptian presidential election, hundreds of thousands of Egyptians voted for Mo Salah.
I referred to Sergio Ramos, but in Egypt, he's public enemy number one after what he did in that 2018 Champions League final when he suplexed Mo Salah.
Welcome, everybody, to Make Football Great Again, your definitive 48-nation roadmap to the 2026 World Cup. My name's Harry Brent, and over the coming weeks, we're profiling every single nation heading to the tournament this summer to find out more, not just about the teams, but about the countries, cultures, and fans involved as well. Today, we're covering Egypt, and I'm delighted to say that we're joined by African football journalist and expert, Ali Howorth. Ali, fantastic to have you on again. How's it all going?
Oh, doing so well, man. So keen to talk about Egypt. What a country! What a podcast! What a show! Let's get stuck in.
So in a second, we're going to learn all about Egypt and what we can expect from them. But I'm going to kick off the episode with a section I like to call One Truth and One Lie. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to present two seemingly crazy facts about the Egyptian national team. One of those facts is 100% true. The other one is completely made up. So I'll read them back to back, and then you let me know which you think is the true fact. So, fact number one. During the 2018 Egyptian presidential election, hundreds of thousands of Egyptians voted for Mo Salah, even though the footballer's name was not on the ballot for obvious reasons. Fact number two. During an international friendly in 1955, an Egyptian player walked off the pitch midway through the first half and refused to come back on because he claimed the shadow of a stadium floodlight looked exactly like an Egyptian sphinx, which he considered sacred. Since he didn't want to accidentally step on the shadow, he refused to take part in the game. So, Ali, what do you reckon? Salah or Sphinx?
That's very good. I mean, the 1950s is just like rife with that kind of those kind of stories. Like, was Egypt not a team that like was meant to play in the first World Cup but missed their boat or something? Like, it feels very of that era, like these kind of outrageous stories. I feel like I remember hearing something about Salah getting a lot of votes in the election, so I think I'm going to go with that as being true. But I feel like I remember that.
You are correct. Yes, that's right. Yeah, you got, as I say, hundreds of thousands of people, which is understandable considering the season he had. I'm not sure exactly when in 2018 the election took place, but that was right when he, first season joining Liverpool, and so the Salah hype would have been.
If it was during the summer, they probably would have written Sergio Ramos just so they could then like cut it across, like burn it or something.
So Egypt, they became the first African nation to qualify for the World Cup in 1934, or to play in the World Cup if they did indeed miss their boat. I think you're right, actually, saying they missed their boat for the very first one. I think I did hear that somewhere. But they had to wait over half a century to feature for a second time at Italian 90, and nearly 30 years again to feature a third time at Russia 2018. This summer, they're in Group G alongside Belgium, Iran, and New Zealand, where they'll be looking to clinch their very first win at a World Cup tournament. But before we talk properly about that tournament, Ali, I just want to kick off with a segment we call the travel log. So before we get into players and tactics and stuff, I just want to talk a little bit more about the culture and the history behind the Egyptian national team. So tell us, who, for you, is Egypt's footballing GOAT?
That is a very hard question to answer in Egypt, and it has been the debate for a long, long time, because there is one very obvious answer, which is Mohamed Salah. And I think with this discussion, I think you almost have to separate it into two things: who is the best ever and who's the greatest ever, because there's no doubt in Egypt, Salah is the best ever Egyptian player to play football. He's phenomenal, and he is such a star. I think, for instance, when Omar Marmoush first signed for Man City, and that first game that City and Liverpool played, I think it was something absurd, like 130 million Egyptians watched that match.
Wow.
Such is the kind of star power of Salah. He is in many ways the best. But in Egypt's a funny country, because you mentioned the kind of sparse kind of appearances at the World Cup. They are the Afcon team. They are Mr. Africa. They've won the Afcon way more than anyone else. And Mohamed Salah hasn't won it. He's taken them to 2 finals. He's taken them to, I think, 3 or 4 semifinals, but he's never got over the line. And there's a whole host of players, including their coach, Hossam Hassan, who's also the top goal scorer, who have won it multiple times. There's a whole lot of players who won it 2 times, a lot of players who've won it 3 times. I think a lot of Egyptians would point to Mohamed Aboutrika as perhaps the one person who would stand tall against Salah. He won 3 Afcons, brilliant number 10, also a legend at Al Ahly, the biggest club in Africa, won multiple Champions League titles with them. I think over the last couple of years, Salah has just pushed them over that, particularly with his World Cup qualifying performances. He single-handedly dragged them to the 2018 World Cup. They were a pretty dreadful side, actually, in 2018, and he essentially just took them to the World Cup. I think in the last game against Congo-Brazzaville, he scored with the last kick of the game to qualify for them to the World Cup. So I think if he spoke to Egyptians, would be considered the GOAT. But for a very, very long time, he, even at his peak, would not have been considered that in Egypt because he hasn't won anything with them.
You mentioned various Afcon wins, 7 by my count. What would you say is Egypt's most celebrated football result? I mean, it may not be necessarily an Afcon win, but what would you say is Egypt's, the sort of result, the match that fans will sort of look back on and go, that's the one I champion above all else?
Yeah, that's again, it's a hard one. I think it's probably, for me, it's between two. I think the 2010 Afcon win was a huge one because that was the kind of, I would say 2006, 2008, they were probably the best team in Africa. There was a few other very good teams, Ghana and Cote d'Ivoire were also very good. But 2010, they were not a good side. And they kind of just got it over the line by kind of sheer force of will. And I think that is a very Egyptian footballing identity. They very much fall into that camp of, we do not care how we play. We are identified as winners. That's all that matters. And you see that they've got the 2 most successful club teams in African football, Al Ahly and Zamalek. And this, goes back to what we're saying about Salah. Like, it matters in Egypt what you won because they're a country that is built off this idea that we win things. I would say the one thing that would contest that, and we mentioned it in one of our other podcasts or one of our other recordings, was the game in 1990 against Algeria to qualify for that World Cup, that first World Cup in almost 40 years, which was played over 2 legs, in which Egypt drew away from Algeria in Algeria and then won 1-0 in Egypt in front of a crowd. I think it was like 114,000 or something incredible in the Cairo International Stadium. And their current head coach, Hossam Hassan, I believe, was the man who scored the goal that took them to that World Cup. So I think from an Egyptian perspective, probably that game just slightly edges it because that game was very, very special because of the fact that they haven't done much at the World Cup as opposed to Afcons.
If Egypt get knocked out this summer, which team would fans hate to see go on and lift the trophy?
I think probably Algeria would be the answer. Maybe a little shout for Saudi Arabia as well, because there's a lot of tension between those 2 countries, and the kind of cultural capital of Egypt is so great, despite the kind of financial capital of Saudi Arabia. There's a lot of Egyptians living in Saudi Arabia, but I think from a pure footballing standpoint, Algeria and Egypt is kind of one of the great rivalries in international football. So I think I would have to say Algeria.
As you sort of mentioned there, Egypt's the most successful nation in Afcon history, 7 titles, but haven't won a single game at the World Cup and have had all these sporadic appearances as we've touched on. How does a nation with such supreme continental status kind of, process being historic underachievers at the World Cup?
Yeah, process is probably the right word because there almost isn't a processing of it. And we felt that in the 2018 World Cup. I referred to Sergio Ramos, but in Egypt, he's public enemy number 1 after what he did in that 2018 Champions League final when he suplexed Mo Salah in the first half, kind of dislocated his shoulder, did something to his shoulder. And essentially there was just this hysteria in Egypt of, we need Salah to be fit for the World Cup. Like, he has to play. And there was this kind of desperate energy for him to be there because there was so much pressure on that World Cup. Because 1990, yes, they didn't win, but they were very, very good. I mean, I think if you speak to any of the England players that played in that team, I think Mark Wright scored the only goal. They'll tell you how good Egypt were at that World Cup. They were a very, very good team, but they couldn't get any wins, couldn't get it over the line. And then in 2018, it was a huge letdown because there was so much pressure. There was just kind of this craze to, we have to get Salah fit. We have to compete. And then when Salah did play, when he shouldn't have, he just was not fit. He was, you could tell he wasn't able to go into these challenges robustly. He had a very poor tournament. They had a terrible tournament, crashed out of the group stage in Russia's group and Saudi Arabia's group. And I think it's hard. I think it's hard for Egyptians to process, to be honest. It's hard to kind of contend with that. And to get past that because they've been so good in Africa. And it's hard because their best team, I mentioned in the late 2000s, they were the best team in Africa. So the fact that they then couldn't show the rest of the world how good they were aside from in the odd kind of Confederation Cup, which they did play very well. There's one iconic game when they played Brazil in the Confederation Cup where they kind of outplayed Brazil for large parts. But that, even the fact that I'm bringing up the Confederation Cup points to the kind of desperate need to we need to be validated somehow. So there is a lot of hysteria around the World Cup from an Egyptian perspective because they just haven't achieved in the way that they should have.
Yeah, you mentioned Mo Salah kind of coming into the team off the back of that sort of reality. And obviously he's been hugely successful at club level, successful to a certain degree with the Egyptian national team, but obviously a massive icon in the country. What is Salah fandom like in Egypt? I mean, not least just because of how big of a footballer he is, but as you sort of say, he could be, is he this sort of figure that's seen as like somebody who has returned the country and the team, or sort of is beginning to drag the country and the team to its former glory?
Absolutely, 100%. He is seen as that. And Salah, there's a couple things that make him unique. The first is that he didn't play for one of the two big teams in Egypt. He didn't play for Al Ahly. He didn't play for Zamalek. That is very important in Egypt in terms of who can be allowed to like him and who can be allowed to not like him, because that fandom drives everything, those two clubs. Yeah. So the fact that he, grew up in very rural Egypt and then moved essentially straight from there to Switzerland kind of helped him a lot, I think, which kind of leaves him as this kind of neutral, iconic figure. There has been some criticisms of Mo Salah in the past for his lack of political activism. We know Salah is a very, very private man, very rarely posts online, very rarely does any interviews. And in part, that's because he's negotiating these really difficult realities in terms of what he can and can't say, because he is, we forget Egypt's one of the biggest countries in the world. It's one of the biggest footballing countries in the world, I would say behind maybe just Brazil. In terms of population. And so he's very careful with what he says. He's very careful in the way he carries himself in public life. He's a very private man. And on the one hand, that's allowed him to kind of stay above a lot of these, whether it's political issues or club kind of tribalism, which makes him a superstar. But it also does he's a bit removed. Egyptians don't really feel like they're connected. Whereas say, Trezeguet, not Trezeguet, and another Egyptian player, Mohamed Aboutrika, was known for his activism. So he took off his shirt in a game for Al Ahly that said, I stand with, I think I can't remember exactly the words, but it was, I stand with Gaza. And this would have been back in 2012, 2013, that kind of time. Whereas Salah, there's that removed kind of sense because he's never lived in Egypt since he was 16. He's never been a part of that. But that also allows him to be a star because he's kind of neutral. He's kind of just this icon. He's more than just a person. He's this kind of, this symbol.
Right, we'll move on to the scouting report. So in this section, we'll find out a little bit more about Egypt, the team, and what we can expect from them generally at the tournament. So for the British fans tuning in, Ali, who are we going to recognize in the squad? Mo Salah's one of them, but are there any others that we're gonna know?
Yeah, I mean we've mentioned it already, but Omar Marmoush is the other one. He hasn't quite. He's been both in an Egyptian context and I would say a Man City context. The guy who's just not quite fulfilled his potential. He's been so close. I remember doing podcasts ahead of the 2021 Afcon and being like, this young guy called Omar Marmoush who's gonna kind of take this tournament by storm. He's so good, and he's not quite done that. And I think Man City fans would probably say the same. Like they see the great player that's there. He's not quite stepped into that. I would say at the last Afcon there were moments. I think I was at the first match when they beat Zimbabwe. He scored the goal. They were losing 1-0. He kind of took the game by the scruff of his neck, kind of almost as a midfielder, like a kind of 10, almost an 8 at times. And kind of really took the game by the scruff of its neck, then scored the goal. Salah then scores the winner. But those two, I think that's kind of been one of the conundrums of Egyptian football is like, how do we get these two to play together? How do we get them to get the best out of each other?
So is that something they've been doing? Have they been moving Marmoush into almost a midfield role to kind of compensate for having Salah in there as well?
So they initially did at the Afcon. So and this is kind of, again, part of the tactical narrative of Egypt is they actually have a very, very good attack. They don't have a great defense in terms of the personnel. So the other one that Premier League fans might recognize is Mohamed Trezeguet, who used to play for Aston Villa. He has been very, very good for Egypt, extremely good for Al Ahly since he moved back to Egypt, probably the best player of the season. And they have a few others, you know, Ahmed Zizou, who's got over 60 caps and has been very, very good. Probably one of the best penalty takers in the world. Just one of these guys who finds the top corner every time. But they've got a lot of attacking options. And in qualifiers and in their first game at the Afcon, they played this expansive football, and it was really great to watch. And it was so enjoyable as a neutral to watch, and watch Marmoush dropping in and playing in these kind of creative ways. They were very poor defensively that game. Zimbabwe cut them open time and time again. And I think Hossam Hassan, their head coach, who is seen as this, I mean, he's an incredible icon in himself and has so many crazy stories. But he was a center forward. He's the all-time top goal scorer in Egypt, just a couple goals ahead of Mo Salah. But he kind of played this expansive football. But then after this game, he's kind of said, right, no, absolutely not. We're completely flipping the switch. They moved to a back five. They played incredibly defensive football. And it kind of worked. It got them to the AFCON semi-final quite unexpectedly. The expectations were very low at this AFCON. And then, so once he moved to that, then it was essentially this 3-5-2. Marmoush and Salah were just left as the two forwards to kind of do what they can. But that was kind of the tactical setup. It was just like, right, it's kind of gone back to that. Like, we don't really have a plan. You two just try and work your magic. And they both had pretty good tournaments. Salah he scored more goals than he has ever at an AFCON and was very good. But yeah, that is still the conundrum, is how do you get the most out of all these attacking pieces?
Yeah, Salah has had a difficult season at Liverpool. He's obviously, on his way out. Will he still be Egypt's talisman at this tournament, or is there some? Will that role fall to somebody like Marmoush or somebody else, or is Salah still the man?
He's still the man. There's zero question about that. I mean, I was watching a Saudi Pro League game, and it was maybe the Saudi Cup final or something. And there were more Salah shirts in the crowd than there were of either of the two teams playing. And that kind of yes, there's a lot of Egyptians living in Saudi Arabia, but that is the kind of cultural capital that Mohamed Salah has. Like, he's bigger than these entire clubs in their own home countries. He is huge. He's an icon, and he's still seen as that player who will drag them. And like I said, the AFCON, which happened just after he kind of had his post-match presser kind of explosion against Leeds and all of that, like peak kind of falling out at Liverpool, he did have a very good AFCON. Like, it was kind of a very modern Salah performance where you kind of felt most of the game, you're like, Salah is he any good anymore? And then he pops up with the important moments and scores the goals and kind of does what he does. So he is the talisman. There is no doubt about it.
Do Egypt fans feel that the team owes Salah a strong tournament, after missing the last two of the last three World Cups, and having failed sort of to get him that AFCON victory that he's been sort of wanting? Or is it the opposite? Do they kind of feel, okay, Salah, you've been this unbelievable player for X amount of years. Now is the time to kind of step up and drag us to some form of glory here?
I think there's a little bit of both, if I'm honest, because what you can say is, okay, yes, Salah has not won an AFCON. He, as I mentioned earlier, he dragged Egypt to the 2018 World Cup. And even at this World Cup, he was the top goal scorer in African qualifying, only behind Marc Guéhi. He's the all-time top goal scorer in African qualifying for World Cups. So, like, he scored more goals than anyone else in Africa in World Cup qualifiers. He has done so much for Egyptian football. And even you think of the 2021 AFCON, which they reached the final, they were a dreadful, dreadful team. And he didn't have a great tournament either, but he still dragged them to that final. So I think there's a sense of, okay, we owe it to Salah to bring our best and to kind of get the best out of him. But I do think, like you said, there's also the flip side. It's like 2018, Salah had a terrible tournament. There were mitigating circumstances because of his injury. But there is also a sense like, this is your last chance to do something great with Egypt. This is your last chance to really step up and on the biggest stage of all to do that. So there is expectation on him as well.
You mentioned he's 2 goals away from matching Egypt's all-time record goal scorer, Hossam Hassan, that is a tongue twister for you, who's their manager. How desperate will Salah be to equal or break that record? Is he the kind of guy that sort of cares about that stuff, or is he not going to be particularly bothered about breaking it at the big stage?
No, he cares. He'll say he doesn't care. I'm sure he'll be asked about that in the first game, and Hossam Hassan will also be asked about it, and they'll kind of say, "Oh no, it'd be great, but I don't really care. It's about the team." Salah cares about these things, and that's why uniquely, even now when he's leaving Liverpool, there was so little talk of him going to Saudi Arabia or the MLS, because Saudi Arabia have been offering him so much money for a very long time. And he doesn't want that. He is someone who's driven by like success. That's what he cares about. And he cares about legacy, but in the context of footballing success. All he wants to do is win trophies. All he wants to do is win kind of awards and score as many goals as possible. So absolutely, he will be thinking going into this World Cup, this is the award that is within my grasp. And again, I'm going to say that is kind of mind blowing, the fact that and speaks to the strength of Egyptian football, that he is not their all-time record goal scorer. I think there's only 2 players above, or maybe 3, who are above Hossam Hassan, all-time African players who are record goal scorers. And these are guys who played in Malawi and Zambia in like the 60s and 70s, when you're playing, essentially only playing the teams around you, and you can kind of score a lot of goals. So the fact that Mohamed Salah has whatever it is, like 67 goals at international level, which is an obscene amount, and he's still not the record goal scorer for Egypt, kind of speaks to the strength of Egypt as a nation. And also speaks to kind of how much he needs that kind of for his own legacy.
So just looking at their group then, Belgium, Iran, as things stand, and New Zealand, how do you think Egypt will get on in that group? And what are the expectations like in the country?
I think they have a real shot of getting out of this group. I think that's what they would be thinking, because look, Belgium, I think, is a bit of a write-off in terms of the match. But also, this is not a vintage Belgium team. You know, this isn't the golden generation Belgium. This is a new team. This is a team that's kind of figuring it out themselves. And then obviously we have no idea what to expect from Iran. We have no idea where they'll be playing, if they'll be playing, and in what state they'll be playing. So I think there's a real sense that Egypt can kind of take advantage of that. And then of course, New Zealand, Egypt will fancy themselves to beat New Zealand at every kind of step of the way. So I actually think, despite not being amongst the best African nations coming into this tournament, I think Egypt really will fancy themselves at this tournament, because they've kind of got the luck of the draw, really. And I think they also, again, we always have to talk about this with this new kind of format with the best place third team, second place teams. Even if they come second, they will play the second place team in the US's group. So that's Australia, Turkey, Paraguay, and the US. Egypt will fancy themselves against any of those teams. Like, yes, if they played the US at home or Turkey, they maybe wouldn't be favorites, but I think they would fancy themselves. I think Egypt are actually in a position where it's like, this isn't an amazing Egyptian side. We don't really know what to expect from them, but actually they might make a deep run at this tournament.
Yeah, given that, but favorable group, favorable kind of run in the knockouts potentially. What can we expect from them tactically? You kind of mentioned before about that sort of pragmatic approach of setting up and then just sort of allowing Salah and Marmoush to do whatever they're going to do. But is there a sort of possibility that they might be a little bit more on the front foot and go, no, come on, we can really go at this and go at teams?
Well, I think, again, we sometimes look at the matches after as a good example. So in March, they played Saudi Arabia and they played Spain. Against Saudi Arabia, actually, Salah wasn't available for either of these games, right? Marmoush played up front, and they were able to play some of these other really exciting players. You know, Ahmed Zizou, I've already mentioned, Mohamed Trezeguet. They played this guy, Islam Issa, who had a very, very good game, but unfortunately will miss the tournament, which I am devastated for, mainly because Issa in Arabic is Jesus. So I think the idea of a player coming to America called Islam Jesus would just be fantastic and would kind of break the psyche. But against Saudi Arabia, they were playing away from home. They destroyed them. They beat them 4-0. They kind of took the reins off them. They played this very, very ambitious formation, very attacking. And they were excellent. They were really good. Against Spain, yes, it was a slightly rotated Spain side. But I mean, Lamine Yamal was playing, and this is Spain we're talking about, one of the favorites. They drew 0-0. And I think that speaks a lot to actually Egypt's capacity. So I think there is nothing in between for Egypt. They will either go at you, guns blazing, or they will just shut up shop. And I think we'll see both in this group. I think we'll see against Belgium, them playing this defensive football. Maybe a back five, depending on the center backs that are available, because again, they don't have many that are in good nick. And then against, I think, New Zealand and against Iran, I think we'll see a far more ambitious kind of Egyptian side. And I will say that that's the one great thing about Hossam Hassan. He's not a great tactician. He's a massive hothead. He's gotten in trouble. He was once arrested for assaulting a photographer. He is kind of a bit of a crazy guy, and his brother is even crazier. He's got a twin brother. And they're remarkable because they're twins. They moved together to every single club they ever played with. I thought pretty much.
Wow.
They got married at the same ceremony together. They then had kids on the same day. It's just this, and Ibrahim is on the coaching staff, and they were part of the same Egyptian side that won these Afcon. So he's not. All that to say is Hossam Hassan is not tactically an incredible coach. He's not. He's very limited. He's more of a pundit, really, and that's kind of what he's known for in Egypt. But he's happy to be bold, and he kind of plays that almost Gareth Southgate. I know they're very different temperaments, but that kind of Gareth Southgate role where he's kind of quite good with the media, says the right things, is a bit tactically simple, but is able to get the best out of his players. So I think we'll see both. I think we'll see defensive football, and I think we'll see very attacking football, but not at the same time.
What would you say is Egypt's biggest strength, and what would you say is their biggest weakness heading into the tournament?
Yeah, I mean, their biggest strength is going forward. Now, like I said, there's questions over whether they can get the best out of that attack, because there's so many good players in there. Another underrated one is Imam Ashur, who kind of essentially moved from Egypt to Norway to one of these kind of I think it was Midtjylland, one of these clubs where it's like, and he was expected to go on to great things in Europe, and they essentially just like didn't fancy it. Like, was just like, this is so cold. I'm actually being paid less here in Norway than I was in Egypt. I'm just going to go back home. So like he's now back in Egypt playing for Al Ahly. We've got so many attacking players, but it's just how can they fit them together? Their big questions are defensively. They have not had a settled back four or back five for a long time. A lot of their players like Yasser Ibrahim, Rami Rabia are all in their mid to late 30s. The one guy who's meant to be this kind of new amazing center back, Mohamed Aboutrika, who's at Nice in France, has really struggled with injuries. So that's the big issue for them, is it's like they don't have a good defense. And so it means that when they defend, they have to like defend with everyone, and it means they can't attack. So that's for me is their big issue, is kind of at center back and at full back.
You get to take one England player and put him into Egypt's team for the World Cup. Who are you picking and why? I
think I would say Marc Guéhi. That's what they're crying out for, like an elite center back, someone who can marshal that defense and calm on the ball and kind of allows them to play attacking football whilst also being solid defensively.
Makes complete sense, yeah. Right, we will wrap up with some rapid fire questions before I get your controversial prediction for the World Cup to wrap us up completely. So, Ali, who is going to win the 2026 World Cup? I've asked you this question before, but you can say answer if you like.
Yeah, I'm trying to think if there's a better answer. I'm going to jump ship. I'm going to say Spain are going to win it.
Spain. Okay, nice. How will Egypt get on?
I think Egypt will reach the round of 16.
Nice. Okay. Who's going to win the Golden Ball and who's going to win the Golden Boot?
I think the Golden Ball is going to be won by. Let me have a think.
If Spain are winning it in this one, maybe perhaps a Spanish player, but
they're
sort of injured, aren't they?
Yeah, exactly. So I'm going to go with. I'm just going to go with Mbappe. Why not?
And what about the Golden Boot?
I think if Spain wins it, presuming he's fit enough and can contribute, it will be Lamine Yamal. I think is the answer.
And what is your controversial / outrageous prediction for the tournament?
I think I slightly mentioned this in another one, but I think we're going to have huge logistical problems at this World Cup because of the weather, because of how America has very strict, kind of surprisingly, really strict rules on like weather events, particularly lightning. I think it's like if there's lightning within, I think it's like 10 or 30 miles or something of a stadium, they just have to shut down everything, and they can't play until it's been half an hour since the last lightning strike. So when I was in the US last year for the Club World Cup, I flew to Atlanta, I can't remember where from, arrived at the airport, we had taxied in, but then a lightning strike happened like 30 miles away. So all the staff had to go in and they couldn't hook us up to the gate. So we were stuck on the plane having arrived for 3 hours because that's kind of their rules. So I think, and we saw that in the Benfica Chelsea game, that was delayed for ages. I was at a game, I think it was Al Ahly Porto. So I think we will see some big problems caused by lightning.
Yeah, the Benfica Chelsea game, that was like, it was, what was it, a minute or two to go, and it ended up being delayed hours. So
it took like 4 hours or something for the game to actually finish, or whatever.
They're
it was.
obviously not afraid to.
They don't mess about.
Yes. Keep it on that one. Well, Ali, thank you very much indeed. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on for all of these podcasts. This is the last one. If this does go out last, that's why I'm saying all four. Anyway, we'll let the editors sort that one out. And that does it for our Egypt preview. Let us know in the comments how you think the Pharaohs will get on at the tournament this summer. And join us next time for more stories, insights, and deep dives as our global scouting mission continues as we count down the days to the 2026 World Cup. Until next time, keep making football great again.